Thank you. So, welcome everyone. I'm really delighted to be with you for this hour. This time I'm calling listening to the soul of the world. And in this hour, I'm going to share some of the threads of a very long story that actually began years ago. As I said in my email invitation, I hope these series of vignettes and intuitive conversations with different elements, including whales and ocean and lake waters, even the coronavirus, may resonate with you and support your own evolving destiny. Alicia, have you muted everybody?
I'm just trying to mute people right now, and then some of them are muting themselves. So
Okay.
Either mute yourself. Okay, I have one. There we go.
Okay, wonderful. All right. So this holiday turned out to be a time of profound undoing. Everything conspired in this process. Encounters with the whales and the other sea creatures, being in an unfamiliar culture and meeting new people, eating different foods, all of this helped to open my heart and mind. But beneath all of these external events, it was my dreams that revealed the deepest undercurrents at work in my psyche. There really isn't enough time, and I'm really not quite ready to share the nature of those dreams, but it was specifically about letting go, opening to, diving deep, and listening. So now we're going to just take a little pause to sync all of our energies together by watching this short little video of a blue whale in the Loretto Bay where we were. And he's doing 4 magnificent, long, slow breaths as you see his body come up to the surface. So as you watch this, take a moment to drop into your heart. Whoops, sorry about that. To drop into your heart and sync your breathing with the whale. Here we go. It's a bit tricky to shift from the slides to the next thing, but I'll do the best I can, so bear with me. I was fortunate to return with my friend Nancy just before the panic about the coronavirus really went viral. And actually now I'm appreciating the peacefulness of this enforced retreat, because one of the patterns that I identified in myself while I was down there was a long-standing pattern of overdoing and overextending. And what the holiday time gave me and the experience of being in that landscape was a deeper sense of beingness. I'll be sharing excerpts from longer writings during this time. Some of them are already published on the website, and others I will be posting in the Andrea Mathieson website under the library section called Earth Song Notes. If you want to read them, you'll be able to find them there. But this story actually began almost a year ago when I was visiting my friend's island in Georgian Bay. And I was shocked at the high level waters there. Many of the beautiful striped rocks were under water, and it was completely impossible to walk all the way around the island. Over 25 years, I've visited this place every summer, and I've cultivated a really deep and reciprocal relationship with the landscape. So because I was curious about what was happening at a deeper level, I tuned in and heard the spirit of nature say, I am healing. I'm taking back. Interestingly, this exact phrase was echoed a couple of days ago in The Guardian with the headline, Nature is taking back Venice. And the water there is now clear, seaweeds growing, and ducks and fish and even dolphins are swimming in the canals now. Later that summer, this is still 2019, I went with a small group of women to the shore of Lake Ontario, and we were listening for a message about how to be with the wounds of the world at this time. So this is part of the message I received from nature. Now, just a little headway on this. The waters in Lake Ontario were also very high, so many of the walkways and shoreline were completely ravaged. So nature said, I bring life, I take it away. I cleanse and I nourish. I meet you today in my role as cleanser. You fear destruction, but your boundaries were, at best, artificially constructed to accommodate your will and desires. You cannot begin to see what's being cleansed by my rising tides. A new bargain is being struck, not all in your human favor. Yet I am essentially the same, life giver, nourisher, and cleanser. Through storms and melting ice, I'm reclaiming my vitality. You must reclaim what is yours. You are witnessing the holy conspiracy of all the elements, wind, water, fire, and earth, mustered toward creating a new design. You can listen and bow to these forces in deep humility and respect for what's being cleansed and carved anew. Or you can waste precious breath fighting the inevitable. It's your choice, not our concern. The cleansing is going on and must continue. The question is, will you be present to the immense power of change, or will you shrink in separate fear and self-protection? A little shaken by this message, I tuned in with my guide Iliadne, who in September gave me an equally sobering message. Do not underestimate the groundswell phenomenon at work now. It's coming to a crescendo in the next 8 months. Now, that was September, so 8 months is still, we're still in that period of time until April. What will arise during this time are the seeds of a future you can only glimpse. At the end of the long message, her final statement still gives me pause. From May to August of 2020 will be the burning times. And she said, maybe to reassure me a bit, you'll understand more about this later. This is Loretto Bay. Oh no, I want to say something else before we go there. I shared that information not to frighten you, and I'm not a psychic or a prophet. But looking back through my journals and pulling some of the threads together, leading up to where we are now, I hope these may help us all endeavor to be with what is unfolding. So in November, my friend Nancy McMillan, a woman from Kingston, Ontario, invited me to accompany her to a warm climate for a few weeks in the winter. I agreed, and Nancy Windhart, a colleague in Santa Fe, recommended we go to Loreto, Mexico. She's taken groups down to the Baja to be with the whales on the eastern side of the peninsula. And I know you, Lisa, and maybe Kristen too, have been with Nancy on those some of those trips. Arriving on February 14th, we immediately fell in love with the rugged desert landscape. I'd never seen anything like it in my life. And flying over Loretto Bay, pods of whales greeted us. Their huge backs were visible from the air. This scene made me recall a dream from many years ago. Here's the dream. On a sandy shore of a small lake in northern Ontario, a gigantic whale beaches itself right in front of me. Sensing he wants to communicate with me, I run up to the house to get my camera. I'm afraid no one will believe me if I don't record the moment, but when I return, the creature is gone. I wake up horribly disappointed at the missed opportunity. And later I decide to commune with the whale through automatic writing. And this is a small part of the whale's message. There's a deep and painful aching in the oceans, the watery womb of the planet. We're not asking to be saved. That time is past. We know our immediate future and have accepted it. You need us and we need you. The first step is simple. Be present with us. Open your heart and listen. Our speech works in your cells in ways you scarcely remember. We need your heart and brains. You need our ways of knowing. What has been divided, human from animal, must be remembered. There is little time for this work. Nancy and I quickly settled into a gentle routine of sharing our dreams in the morning, walking down to the ocean, just blocks from our casita, meditating with the land, the ocean, and the birds. I just fell in love with these corny pelicans and the beautiful yellow-footed seagulls. And we loved exploring the charming town. It is a town of contrasts. Right across from where we stayed for the last 2 weeks of our 3-week time was this rundown place. But no matter what was run down, there were still these extravagant bougainvilleas dripping everywhere, all over town. It was such a delight to see them. This is the casita where we stayed, a compound with about 8 other little buildings like that, some permanent residents and others B&B rentals. It was a lovely place to stay. As soon as we arrived and went down to the ocean, I felt a really deep desire to be present to whatever was in this foreign landscape. But when I attempted to commune with the ocean on the first couple of days, I heard, "You're not ready to receive messages. We're tuning you." That was humbling. And then on the next day, this message, "You're not here just to be with the whales, but the entire community of sea life." Now that felt a bit overwhelming and disorienting. So I went into meditation to get my feet under me again. And I heard, "You're losing your old identity. You're losing your old identity. It cannot be found through willpower. Stay in the unknowing. It will be given." Later that afternoon, I went down to the seawall and a huge wave of grief rose in me as I began to sense the enormous gaps in the web of the sea life. Then, loud and clear, I heard the single word issuing from the heart of the ocean: "Stop." And despite the ache in my own heart, I sensed that all the elements would be able to self-correct if they could simply be left to themselves. And Kristen, I know you heard the same thing in your meditation. One day we went to visit Coronado Island, and we were greeted by pods of playful dolphins. As I watched them, my heart leapt with this word spontaneously: cousins! They're my cousins! So here's a clip of the dolphins. There were hundreds of them. They were so playful, and I just loved watching them dance around and under our boat the whole time. This is Coronado Island, and I had not expected to see the incredible rock formations. This is a volcanic island. And as we went around the island, I was mesmerized by these strange formations. They just look creature-like in some respects. There were also sea lions, and I've had fun mimicking them. Let's see if I can get into this properly here. So they were so noisy. This is a trail up on Coronado that led from one side of the island to the other, and beautiful plants that I'd never seen before. I was fascinated by that. Nancy and I swam in the ocean. The only time that we did was on this beautiful white sandy beach off the island. The next day, we drove into the hills from Loreto, about an hour, and to this mission built in the 1700s, the San Xavier Mission. Jesuits founded both the mission here and in Loreto back in the 1700s, and the chapels are open for the public still. On the way back down to Loreto, one of the men that we went up with in the car was taking shots, and even with the late afternoon light, you can get a sense of how magnificent this landscape is. That's the ocean in the distance. So we were on the edge of an enormous canyon here, very windy.
Yeah.
Standing on the seashore the next morning, I felt a really gentle rocking sensation and heard, "Feel the ocean tides, the pull of lunar rhythms gently rocking the base of your belly. Rest into this deep, slow rhythm. It holds a restorative wisdom that your mind has forgotten." Wanting to be sure I was on track and still feeling stretched by all I was opening to, I took some time to ask Source, what do you want of me? You can hear the workaholic on holiday, wanting to make sure that something significant happened, and I was still very much in doing mode. And the response was swift and simple. Continue opening and do not narrow prematurely into doing. You would miss what needs to be planted in you during this stay. Then, on the day before we were going to see the gray whales, I tripped stepping off the sidewalk and sprained my ankle. So feeling a little humbled and chagrined, I asked Iliadne for some perspective. And she said, your world is cracking open and you're faltering. That's all. Everybody will encounter these points more swiftly and sometimes dramatically as they and the world shift to a new level of coordinated alignment. You cannot expect to remain intact and safe while the rest of the world undergoes a massive reorientation. It's not about saving the old world. That time has been gobbled up. It's about new threads of connection for a future that's much more in the hands of nature than human design. Human nature has gone as far as it can in separation. At this tripping point, humility is essential. On February 28th, we drove across the Baja Peninsula to Magdalena Bay to be with the great gray whales. They're really friendly creatures. The mothers actually nudge their babies up to the boats to greet the human beings. But this day was particularly poignant for me. It was the 29th anniversary of the birth and death of the dwarf daughter that I had, who I named Cholula Raven. And it was her brief time in my life that initiated the whole cycle of my deep transformation and led me into this work that I do today. I'm sure most of you are aware of that story, which is on my Raven Essence website. So here I am, leaning over, and the mother is approaching, and on the right picture, the baby comes up right into my hands and turns its head so that I'm able to stroke its cheek. It was a very special moment. This little clip is the mother and baby swimming together. So you just watch carefully and you'll see the mother come up and then the baby. There's the mother and there's the baby right there. The mother and then the baby again. Very special time. When we went to see the blue whales in Loretto Bay, we had the privilege of meeting this rather extraordinary young man, David Feeney, as our tour guide. And I asked him, where are you from? Not sure I'd got his accent right. And sure enough, he's from Ireland. And he volunteers 3 months of his, he leaves his work as an environmentalist in Europe and comes over, he has done this for a number of years, to introduce people to the whales. And he does it with no pay other than a few tips. But he loves to see the transformation in people's faces when they have these experiences with the whales. So we had an extraordinarily illuminating instruction about the creatures that we saw. We saw humpbacks, bluefin whales, the blue whales themselves, manta rays, dolphins, and he was able to tell us all kinds of facts about that. I was pleased to be able to offer him a connection to John O'Donoghue, who he'd never heard about, and also recommended to get in touch with Diana Beresford Kruger, because I felt that her take on the Druid Irish connection would be very, very meaningful for him. And with his environmental expertise, he could, and his love of Gaelic, he speaks Gaelic as well. So that was a very special meeting to have him with us. The day before we left, Nancy and I did a ritual of gratitude and farewell to the land and the energies there. We did this in our casita and then took the ashes, the cornmeal, and the crushed flowers down to the water and placed them in different places. And when I got back after that, I sat outside the casita and began making to-do lists for my return, thinking about what I wanted to do this spring. Yes, ever the worker. This shot on the right-hand side was what was a planter with all these beautiful flowers and cactuses right outside our space. So resting in the sun, I began to open my self to the sense of the rhythms of my life. And what I experienced was a sense of tremendous spaciousness. I began to feel I really didn't need to rush home and write a newsletter by the end of March. And then I thought, okay, yeah, that feels right. And then I thought, what about April? Well, I can still keep it open. And I kept feeling into that spaciousness and trusting my body until finally September, which felt a long way off, was the first permission I had to begin to initiate anything new. I thought it was a real challenge to trust what could unfold without pushing anything, but I did begin to imagine this 6-month period as a quiet time of writing and gardening, just being open to flow rather than pushing and forging ahead as I tend to do. So I actually wondered, can I do that? My mind said, I'm not sure, but my body said yes. Now, we did not have anything about the coronavirus on our radar while we were in Mexico. There was news of it in Wuhan, but it was still very far away and out of our immediate sphere. So this was not colored by anything of what happened since we've been home. On our last evening, we took David out for dinner just to spend a bit more time with him, and then strolled over to the town plaza where there was a marvelous fado singer performing. And we listened as Penelope sang, "What a Wonderful World." It was such a perfect ending to our time. Flying home with our gifts from the sea, we had an overnight in LA and arrived back on March 8th, just as the fear about the virus was really starting to escalate here. The driver from the airport said he'd already lost $1,500 in booked reservations just in the 3 weeks we'd been away. But people were canceling left, right, and center. So that was kind of a rude awakening. When I got home and settled into Owl's Nest, I began to feel that there was something that had shifted from when I'd left. I wasn't sure if it was me, if it was just the change in weather, but it felt like something had warped in the field, a bit like a science fiction movie. That's why I put this image in. A really poignant example of that was the going down to Lake Ontario, and in my favorite place, there was this massive upturned rooted tree on the hillside. And in my own backyard, the Buddha that had weathered the ice and snow in the winter, all the spray paint that I'd put on it in the summer last year was peeling off. So the Buddha was ravaged. Those were just small symbols of what I was feeling energetically. I sat down within a day or so of being back and began to meditate and connect with the energy of the coronavirus. So this is a bit of the longer meditation. But the first phrase that came was about nature's devilish intelligence. Devilish intelligence, dropping us to our knees, whereas the fires in Australia and the flooding and famine in other parts of the world, we were able to still view from a convenient distance. They didn't appear to directly affect us, even though we felt sad. Meanwhile, it's easy to become psychically numb by the vastness and complexity of the environmental crisis. However, at this tipping point, the virus, what I heard is the virus is specific to the needs of the world now. Its unpredictability creates a systemic global adjustment. Now, this is almost 3 weeks ago that I was home and getting this information. And to watch the adjustment playing out now has been fascinating. At the time, I also heard it's sobering, this sobering part. The virus will have a natural lifespan and there will be more waves in the future. Then I turned my attention to a more personal area, how to tune in on what felt off in my immediate environment, the home and the garden and my own psyche. What did I need to do here in an area where I could have some influence? This is what I heard. See the tilted world in your personal realm. Notice what feels off and meet it humbly and respectfully. It was actually at that point that I looked out the window and saw the Buddha and thought, okay, that's really off. I also asked what the blessing was from this phenomenon. A veil has been rent open. There's space for new vision and amplitude for the mystic. It's not a war between humans and the virus or humans versus nature. We're part of one system. Neither is it punishment. That approach would have been an incentive to appease the gods in the past, to adjust a collective course of action through ritual and sacrifice. This time does require some of the same elements, but with a new level of awareness. And then I heard, go deeper. This has been my byline whenever I'm in meditation these days, go deeper. And I feel the depth of the whales that do that final huge deep dive right to the bottom of the ocean. The surface does not hold any longer. It's cracked, worn, and broken. Go deeper to where the impulse of spring still lives within this home, and put yourself on the altar. What does that mean? Lay down your weapons. I thought of the Sumerian goddess Inanna, stripping off 7 layers as she descended from her throne in the sky. Be in the dark underworld for a time. Listen and learn there, with little interest in saving face. Most will not make this journey, but this is what will restore a new and tenuous balance for the short term. At a personal level, I'm aware from my dreams and my sprained ankle and other warning signs that any premature action on my part is counterproductive and even dangerous. So I continue to listen for guidance about what's needed day by day, including how to stay in touch with my grandchildren. And coordinating with the spirit of this place, I'm getting very clear messages about where I'm to place my focused energy. And for sure, I'll be writing during this time. A couple of days ago, I felt the whales pulling me again into the depths. This was their message this time. In this hushed time, we're tuning the human beings who can listen. To hear, go into a more sacred retreat than mere self-isolation. Make the dive into your body's soul. Let the quiet depths greet and hold you. Rest there. Let yourself be tuned for a new song. When you greet any part of creation, soul to soul, tree or whale, earthworm or stone, you're tending and even mending the world's soul and your own. This is the work of these times. Stay with it.